Welcome to this channel, everybody. Go ahead and subscribe if you have not already. I deliver prophetic insight into global political events. So thank you for sharing this content, and of course, thank you for liking it as well. I want to go ahead and talk about revival today because we're in a time and a season where we're going to see revival break out in nations, groups of people, individuals, on a massive scale. God will release his presence, he will release his goodness, and that usually results in a revival, okay? Where people go from a position of being very desperate and pretty much giving up on life, wanting to give up on life, to encountering the very reason they were created, okay? That transition is essentially revival. It's returning back to our original design. Our original design was always to walk in God's goodness, period. Because we're created in the image of God, we naturally are an extension of his goodness, okay? And so we see that mandate in Genesis chapter 1, verse 28, when God created man and woman, male and female. He entrusted us as the extension of his goodness all over the earth, okay? So essentially when he created the earth, it was his goodness, period, right? And so we were entrusted with maintaining that goodness and even further extending it by continuing to create, okay? By continuing to rule over the earth and having dominion over the earth, okay? It's impossible to walk in our position of dominion outside of the flow of God's goodness, okay? And that is essentially what happened in Genesis 3. Adam and Eve began to live life outside of the flow of God's goodness, and it was complicated. It was suffering, okay? Just like what we're seeing right now all over the globe is just suffering, is where walking outside of that flow and position and alignment of God's goodness as he always intended for it to be, okay? So just a little bit of theology here. In Genesis chapter 3, Adam and Eve essentially allowed Satan, our enemy, to sort of overrule what God had said, okay? Because they allowed Satan to overrule God's mandate and God's standard. Satan was essentially given the legal right, okay, to rule over the earth, okay? So it's almost like we sort of negotiated, or we traded our position with Satan. Satan to overrule his mandate and his standard, and so God couldn't trust us anymore. We unknowingly, obviously, traded our position of dominion and rule to Satan, okay? And Satan has been ruling ever since. However, when Christ came, he came to realign us back, okay, into our position of dominion and rule and authority on the earth. In other words, through Christ, we can now continue to be that extension of God's goodness, okay? And think about God's goodness in the simplicity of what it is. It's his peace, it's his joy, it's his rest, it's his provision, it's our ability to dream, it's our ability to create and command his goodness into existence, just like he did in Genesis 1. Because we're created in his image, we're literally an extension of his goodness, okay? Through Christ, we now return back to our legal position, okay, to be able to extend God's goodness on the earth. And I believe that's what revival is.